I'm Vicky. The house was dark as I stepped inside. The only light seeping in was from a street lamp, casting a pale, fractured glow through the front window and slicing the living room into strips of shadow and faint gold. I closed the door quietly behind me, slipped out of my heels, and placed them neatly by the mat. My feet ached, but it was a pleasant kind of ache, the kind that comes with movement, with standing tall, and with being seen. Before I could even take a breath, I sensed him. Kyle was sitting on the couch, swallowed by the darkness. His figure was just a silhouette against the window. The television was off, and the room felt oddly airless, as if it had been holding its breath, waiting for me. "Nice night," his voice came from the shadows, low and sharp. I didn't flinch. I set my clutch down on the console table. "It was," I answered simply. He stood up abruptly, stepping forward into the weak strip of light. His face was tight, anger etched into every line. But beneath it, something else flickered: fear. "Did you sleep with him? Just tell me. Did you sleep with Ethan?" His words hung in the air like a slap. Years ago, a question like that would have shattered me. The accusation, the contempt, the attempt to pin guilt on me to distract from his own. But now, I simply studied him. The irony was almost bitterly poetic. I didn't raise my voice. "Do you hear yourself, Kyle?" He scoffed. "Don't turn this around. You show up at my event on his arm looking like that." "Your event? You mean the one where your boss brought me in as his guest?" I interrupted softly. He faltered, then pushed forward anyway. "Everyone saw you together. You think I didn't see the way he looked at you?" I folded my arms loosely, not defensive, just steady. "Did you ever notice how you looked at me? Or rather, how you stopped?" I asked. "Because I have been here for years, Kyle, and you only care now when someone else finally sees what you refuse to." His mouth opened, then closed. He looked off balance, like he'd stepped onto a moving train and realized too late. "You're my wife," he said, as if that answered anything. "I'm the woman you mocked in front of your coworkers," I replied quietly. "The frump you laughed about. The person you left at home with screaming babies and therapy appointments while you fell asleep on the couch and smelled like someone else's perfume." My voice didn't rise. If anything, it softened, and that softness was harder for him to withstand than any scream would have been. "For years, I was alone in this marriage. I begged you to talk to me. You told me to find someone else to listen. You left me to hold everything together, the kids, the house, my mother, my own sanity. While you decided you were too important to show up." He swallowed, his eyes flickering. "We used to love each other," he muttered, the words less like a statement and more like a plea. "It wasn't always like this." "I know," I said. And for a brief moment, my expression softened with real sadness. "We did love each other once, or at least I loved you. I fought for us even when you didn't." Silence filled the room. Kyle's shoulders slumped. The anger began to slip, replaced by a kind of exhausted desperation. He sank back down onto the edge of the couch, elbows on his knees, hands clasped in front of his mouth. "I don't know when it all went wrong," he said thickly. I thought this was how it was. I thought you'd always be there." "That's the problem," I answered. "You never noticed that I was here as a person, only as infrastructure. The one who cooked and cleaned and absorbed your moods. You didn't see me until another man treated me like I had value." He looked up at me, eyes wet, regret finally breaking through. "What are you saying? That it's over? Just like that?" His voice cracked. I took a slow breath. My heart ached, but not with panic, with acceptance. "I'm saying I don't want to fight for something hollow anymore. I'm tired, Kyle. Tired of begging for scraps of respect. Tired of raising our kids inside a house where their mother is invisible. I can't do it anymore." He shook his head as if trying to dislodge my words. "So what? What happens now? I looked him straight in the eyes. You have a choice. You can move out, find an apartment, figure out your life, or tomorrow I take the kids and go stay with my mother in Boulder. I won't keep them in this tension. They deserve better. I deserve better. The room seemed to tilt. Kyle stared at me like he was seeing the end of something he hadn't believed would ever truly end. You'd really leave, he whispered. I already have, I replied gently. You're just seeing it now. To understand how I got here, I have to go back. I grew up in a small town. My parents, Lily and Tom, were hard-working people. My father was a mechanic, and my mother worked part-time at a local diner. They were loving but strict, always emphasizing the importance of hard work and responsibility. I was a bright and creative child, with a passion for interior design. I used to rearrange my room constantly, testing how different layouts and colors could change the mood. I dreamed of going to a big city, studying design, and making a name for myself. When I met Kyle, I thought my dreams were coming true. He was charming, ambitious, and seemed to share my vision for the future. We got married, and I moved to the city with him. But then, life took an unexpected turn. My mother, Lily, fell ill. She was a strong woman, always independent, but this illness took a toll on her. Her health deteriorated rapidly, and I had to put my studies on hold to take care of her. I moved back home for a while, taking a part-time job at a local store to make ends meet. Then, our children came. Our son, Jake, was born anxious and sensitive. He was brilliant in so many ways, but he was easily overwhelmed by noise, lights, and crowds. We had to see therapists regularly, child psychologists, occupational therapists, and school counselors. I learned how to prepare him for transitions, how to help him breathe through panic, and how to advocate for him when teachers didn't understand. Our daughter, Ava, had colic so severe that every night was a battle. We were both exhausted until sunrise. I barely slept for months, running on caffeine and instinct, trying to keep everyone fed, clean, and comforted. Through it all, Kyle drifted away. He had once been attentive and affectionate, but as life became more demanding for me, he seemed to detach completely. He started sleeping on the couch, claiming back pain, then stress, and finally just needing space. Our conversations became brief exchanges about groceries, schedules, and bills. We rarely finished a sentence together. One day, after a long day of cleaning, doing laundry, running errands, and picking up the kids, I got a text from Kyle. He had left some important documents on the kitchen counter that morning and needed them urgently. I barely found a parking spot on the crowded street near his downtown office, and with a cardboard box pressed against my hip, I made my way into the building. The lobby was all polished marble and glass, a place where people walked quickly with purpose. I felt out of place in my soft sweater and jeans, my hair pulled into a loose ponytail because Jake had spilled juice on my shirt earlier. I adjusted the box in my arms and followed the receptionist's directions to the third floor. As I stepped out of the elevator, I noticed how quiet the corridor was. There was just the low hum of office lights and the steady clicking of keyboards behind closed doors. I walked toward the conference room where Kyle usually held his afternoon meetings. The door was glass, framed in metal, and I could see a long table inside. But before I reached for the handle, I froze. Kyle's voice carried through the glass, loud and confident, a tone he almost never used with me anymore. "No, I'm serious," he said, laughter in his voice. "If you saw her these days, you'd understand. My wife looks like some kind of frump." My breath hitched. My brain stalled. I wasn't even sure I heard correctly until the room erupted in laughter. I leaned slightly to the side, and through the glare of the overhead lights, I caught a clear glimpse of him. Kyle in his gray button-down, sleeves rolled to his forearms, leaning back in his chair like he owned the room. Across from him sat Maya, a young coworker he had mentioned once or twice. In her early 20s, she had glossy hair, bright lipstick, and that effortless confidence I used to have in my own early 20s. Maya laughed the loudest, tossing her hair back as if Kyle had just told the funniest joke she'd ever heard. Then, almost casually, she reached out and touched his arm. It wasn't flirtatious enough to be called inappropriate, but it was intimate enough that anyone paying attention would understand exactly what was happening beneath the surface. Kyle smirked, enjoying the attention, enjoying the laughter, enjoying being the man who could joke about his own wife like she was a character from a cheap sitcom. I felt the box slipping in my hands. I tightened my grip before it fell, my fingers trembling. My chest tightened as if someone had reached inside and squeezed my heart with an icy fist. I didn't move, couldn't move. No one inside the room seemed to notice the woman standing outside, his wife, the mother of his children, the person who had driven across the city just to bring him something he needed. Their voices continued, light, mocking, dismissive. A colleague chimed in with something I couldn't make out, and there was more laughter. Maya leaned closer to Kyle, her hand grazing his shoulder this time. I swallowed, but my throat was dry and burning. I slowly lowered the box to the carpeted floor. I set it down so gently it made no sound, as if I were afraid even my presence in the hallway might be an inconvenience. Without knocking, without announcing myself, without giving him the chance to see me standing there like a ghost, I turned away. My footsteps were silent on the carpet as I walked back to the elevator, each step feeling heavier than the last. The doors closed in front of me, and I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. The drive home felt longer than usual. The sky was already dimming into dusk, washing the rooftops in orange and purple, but I didn't notice the beauty of it. My hands rested stiffly on the steering wheel, replaying the scene in the conference room over and over, his voice, the words, the laughter. When I finally entered the house, the familiar warmth of the living room lights did nothing to steady me. I walked down the hallway, quietly opening my children's bedroom doors, watching their slow, even breathing. I brushed a strand of hair off Ava's forehead and stood there, my heart cracking in a way I didn't know how to hold together. Back in the kitchen, I sank into a chair. There were no sobs, no dramatic collapse, just stillness, like my body had shut down before my emotions could catch up. My hands rested on the table, shaking faintly as the humiliation settled into my bones. But then, something inside me stirred. I remembered who I used to be, the spirited interior design student with too many ideas and not enough hours in the day to sketch them all. I decided that I needed to take back my life. The next morning, while the kids were getting ready for school, I reached for the silver laptop I barely used anymore. The hinge creaked faintly as I opened it, a sound that made me feel unexpectedly vulnerable, like I was prying open a sealed part of my life. My fingers trembled as I typed the first search, Interior Design Certificate Programs in Colorado. Then another, Denver Interior Design Firms Hiring Junior Designers. And another, How to Rebuild a Portfolio After Years Away. Search results filled the screen, images of modern spaces, job postings full of requirements I wasn't sure I met anymore, and college programs I once dreamed of completing. My throat tightened. Fear rose like a slow tide. I thought I was too old, too rusty, too invisible, too forgotten. I hadn't opened CAD software in years. I hadn't presented a design board since before Jake started therapy, before Ava was born, before my entire world narrowed into a cycle of caregiving and survival. I pressed my palms to the table, breathing through the heaviness. I knew if I closed the laptop now, I might never gather the courage to open it again. My phone buzzed on the counter. I hesitated, then picked it up and called my mother. Lily answered on the second ring, her voice warm and steady. Hey, sweetheart. Everything okay? I swallowed. Mom, I'm thinking about applying for design jobs again. I don't know if it's stupid. I don't know if anyone would even look at me. There was a quiet pause on the other end. Thoughtful, not doubtful. Vicky, Lily said gently. You've always had an eye for beauty. You turned every apartment we ever lived in into something warm and alive. You could make a cardboard box feel like a home. Of course, someone will look at you. I pressed my forehead to my hand, my eyes burning. I'm scared. I'm out of practice. What if I embarrass myself? Then you get up and try again, Lily replied. And if you need help with the kids while you do it, I'm right here always. The reassurance settled over me like a soft blanket. After we hung up, I felt lighter. Not fearless, but steady enough to keep going. I spent the next 2 hours updating my resume, stripping out years of silence, carefully shaping the parts of my early career that still mattered. I found old photos of projects I had helped with, scanned sketches from my design school portfolio, and photographed the little room makeovers I'd done at home over the years. Piece by piece, I rebuilt a small portfolio. Not perfect, not polished, but honest. Finally, I pulled up the website of a boutique design firm in Lodo that I had admired for years. Their work was modern, warm, and full of lived-in spaces that felt like people, not showrooms. I filled out the application form, attached my files, and hovered over the submit button. Minutes passed, maybe an hour. My stomach knotted, my pulse beat in my ears, but I clicked send. The screen confirmed my submission, and I closed the laptop with shaking hands. 2 days passed. I didn't think about it often, not because I didn't care, but because it hurt to hope. On the third morning, while pouring cereal for the kids, my phone chimed with an email notification. I wiped my fingers on a dish towel and checked the screen. We would like to invite you to an interview. For a moment, the kitchen faded. The cereal bowls, the cartoons, the noise of the morning, all I felt was my heart racing loud and bright inside my chest. Terror and hope tangled tightly together, but hope was winning. I stood in front of the hallway mirror early that morning, smoothing the fabric of a dress I hadn't worn in years. It was a simple navy work dress from a time when I still imagined myself building a real design career. Before children, before exhaustion, before Kyle's growing indifference, I applied light makeup just enough to brighten my face, then tied my hair back into a neat low ponytail. When I stepped back and looked at my reflection, I didn't see transformation. I simply saw effort. And for now, that was enough. The kids were still half asleep as I helped them with jackets and backpacks. The sky over Aurora was soft and gray, the kind of morning where everything felt slow enough to reconsider. But I didn't reconsider. I guided them into the car, dropped them off at school with hurried kisses, and turned my steering wheel toward Denver, toward Lodo, toward possibility. I had barely walked back through the front door after school drop-off to grab my purse when Kyle emerged from the bathroom, still in his undershirt, toothbrush in hand. He froze mid-chew as he glanced at my outfit. "You're dressed up," he said, eyebrows raised. I reached for my keys. "I have an interview." Kyle leaned against the doorway, smirking. "Office work isn't reheating chicken nuggets." "Vicky, don't embarrass yourself." The words slid off him casually as if they were harmless, but they landed like pebbles dropped into a pond, small, sharp, and disrupting the surface all the same. I paused just long enough to breathe once slowly. "I'll manage," I said softly, then walked past him without looking back. The drive into Lodo was through traffic and construction barrels, opening into a maze of brick warehouses converted into art studios, tech offices, and the kind of boutique firms that filled design magazines. I found parking 2 blocks from the building. Stepping out of my car with a mix of nerves and determination humming under my skin, I entered the firm's office. It was housed in a renovated industrial space, exposed brick walls, tall windows letting in crisp daylight, black metal beams contrasting with warm wooden floors. I felt an unexpected comfort stepping inside, like my younger self, the one with sketchbooks and design ideas taped to her dorm wall, might still be reachable. A receptionist led me to a glass-walled meeting room where the creative director, a poised woman in her 40s with a sharp bob and kind eyes, greeted me. "Vicky. Thanks for coming in," she said, offering a warm handshake. "We've looked at your portfolio. I'm curious to hear more about your process." My nerves tightened again, but I sat down, clasped my hands, and began speaking softly, honestly. I talked about how I approached space, not with trends first, but with questions about how people actually lived in them. I talked about the small projects I'd done at home, the ways I used color and light to make anxious children feel calmer, the instinct I had for creating spaces that felt safe. The creative director listened intently, nodding. "You think in emotional layers," she said at one point. "Not every designer understands that. It's a strength." I blinked, almost startled. No one had complimented my instincts, my natural way of seeing the world, in years. After a brief tour of the office and a few more questions, the interview wrapped up.